Hello everyone. In this class we will see about 12th standard Botany chapter 7 ecosystem. Before getting into the lesson, let's see what are all the learning objectives. So after learning this chapter, we will be knowing about the structure, function and the types of ecosystem, and also about the ecological pyramids, and we will know about the carbon and phosphorus cycle, and about the pond ecosystem, ecosystem services and management, and importance and conservation of ecosystem, and the types of plant succession. So what is ecosystem? So ecosystem is nothing but a component of the environment in which the living and non-living organisms interact and live together is referred to as ecosystem. For example, if you take a pond ecosystem or water body, you could see many components present in the ecosystem. For example, in the water body, you can find mud, nutrients, clay, dissolved gases, planktons, microorganisms, several aquatic plants, and also animals also like small fish, snake, large fish, frog, tortoise, crane, etc. can be found in the ecosystem. So with this, we are very clear that the ecosystem constitute both the living and the non-living components. And also the living and the non-living components will interact among themselves. For example, for the process of photosynthesis, the plants use sunlight, water, carbon dioxide, nutrients from the soil, and they release oxygen to the atmosphere. So we can understand there is an exchange of material taking place between the living and the space components. So the definition of ecosystem as defined by Tansley. So Tansley have defined ecosystem as the system resulting from the integration of living and non-living factors of the environment. Whereas Odom have defined ecosystem as structural and functional unit of ecology. Now let's see what are all the other parallel systems used for ecosystem. So by different scientists. The term ecosystem is referred to as biosynosis by Carl Moebius. And it is the ecosystem is referred to as microcosm by Forbes. It is referred to as geobiosynosis by Dokuchev and Morozov. And by Friedrich, it is referred to as holozoon. And by Theinmann, it is referred as biosystem. And by Vernadsky, it is referred to as bio-inert body. These are the parallel terms for the term ecosystem used by different ecologists. Now let's see the structure of ecosystem. So the ecosystem comprises of two major components. So what are the two major components? One is abiotic component, that is non-living. The other one is referred to as biotic component, living. So abiotic component or non-living component include the climatic factors such as air, water, sunlight, rainfall, temperature, humidity, and edaphic factors, that is the soil related factors such as soil air, soil water, soil pH, topography related to the land surface, latitude, altitude, and organic components such as carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and humic substances, and also inorganic substances such as carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. So all these constitute the abiotic components of an ecosystem, and hence the total inorganic substances which is present in any ecosystem at a given time is referred to as standing quality, or otherwise referred to as standing state. Now we shall see the second major component of the ecosystem, which is nothing but the biotic component or the living component. So the biotic or the living component, it includes living organisms like plants, animals, fungi, bacteria. And they form the trophic structures of any ecosystem. And on the basis of the nutritional relationship, the trophic levels of an ecosystem can be divided into two components: autotrophic and heterotrophic components. So what is autotrophic component? What are autotrophs? So they are the organisms which can prepare their own food, that is the organic compounds from simple inorganic components. For example, they can prepare the organic compound called glucose from inorganic components by the process called photosynthesis. And in most of the ecosystem, whether it is an aquatic ecosystem or a grassland ecosystem or a desert ecosystem, forest ecosystem, when you take most of the ecosystem, which constitute the autotrophic organisms, normally the green plants, otherwise referred to as the producers, they are the autotrophic components. Now, we shall discuss the heterotrophic components of the biotic environment. The heterotrophic components, they are the organisms which consume the producers. So, since they are consuming the producers, they are referred to as consumers. And the consumers can be categorized as macro and micro consumers. So, the macro consumers are herbivore, carnivore and omnivore. And they are also referred to as primary, secondary and tertiary consumers. So, herbivores are referred to as primary consumers, carnivores are referred to as secondary consumers, and in carnivore itself you have the other carnivores which are eating those carnivores, they are referred to as tertiary consumers. Next is micro consumers. Micro consumers are nothing but decomposers. So, what are decomposers? The organisms that have the ability to decompose or degrade the dead plants and animals to release organic and inorganic nutrients into the environment, and which is thereby released into the soil, which can be again reused by the plants. So those organisms which have the ability to decompose the dead organisms are referred to as decomposers or micro consumers. Example are bacteria, actinomycetes and fungi. The amount of living materials present in a population at a given time is known as standing crop. Okay, so just now we saw the abiotic component is referred to as standing state and the living biotic material is referred to as standing crop. And it is expressed in terms of number of or biomass per unit area. So what is a biomass? The biomass is nothing but it is a measure of fresh weight or dry weight of carbon, weight of organisms. And these biotic components are essential to construct the food chain, food web and ecological pyramids. The functions of ecosystem. The function of ecosystem include creation of energy creation, sharing of energy and cycling of material between the living and non-living components of an ecosystem. So energy can be produced, energy can be shared and it can be recycled also between the living and the non-living world. And before studying the productivity in any ecosystem, we have to understand the role of sunlight, because sunlight is very important and or crucial for plants, that is the producers. So which is the first trophic level of any ecosystem. And the quantity of sunlight is directly proportional to the production of energy by the plants. So you have to note down this point. The quantity, the amount of sunlight is directly proportional to the production of energy. So to understand this, we will learn about photosynthetically active radiation, or otherwise referred to as PAR. So what is PAR? The amount of light available for photosynthesis of plant. Okay, what is the light that is available for photosynthesis is referred to as photosynthetically active radiation. So which is of the wavelength 400 to 700 nanometer. Again, this is very important. So what is the photosynthetically active radiation for the photosynthesis? It is 400 to 700 nanometer. So this light is essential for photosynthesis and plant growth. And this is not always constant because of clouds, tree shades, air, dust particles, seasons, latitudes, and length of the daylight availability. But generally, plants absorb more blue and red light for efficient photosynthesis. Of the total sunlight, 34% reaches the atmosphere, is reflected back into the atmosphere. Okay. And 10% is held up by the ozone. So, when you consider there is 100% of sunlight, out of which 44% is taken or reflected back. So, 34 is reflected back into the atmosphere, 10% is held up by the ozone, water vapor and atmospheric gases. Hence, only 56% of the sunlight will reach the Earth's surface. So, out of this 56% of sunlight reaching the Earth's surface, only 2 to 10% of sunlight is used by the plants for the photosynthesis. Whereas, the remaining percentage of light is dissipated as heat. The photosynthetically active radiation is generally expressed in millimoles per square meter per second by using silicon photovoltaic detector, and you have to make a note of it. And this silicon photovoltaic detector can detect only 400 to 700 nanometer wavelength of the light. And the photosynthetically active radiation value, it range from 0 to 3000 millimoles per square meter per second. At night, the photosynthetically active radiation is 0. Okay, and during midday in summer, so it may reach the peak value of 2000 to 3000 millimoles per square meter per second. Next, let's see about the types of carbon. So there are different types as green carbon, grey carbon, blue, brown and black. So what is green carbon? The carbon that is stored in the biosphere. So due to the photosynthesis, if it is stored, then it is referred to as green carbon. So those that are stored in fossil fuel, they are referred to as grey carbon. And the carbon that is stored in the atmosphere and ocean is blue carbon. The carbon that is stored in forest, that is wood, then it is referred to as brown carbon. And the carbon that is emitted from the gas, diesel engine and coal-fired power plants, they are referred to as black carbon. So these are the different categories of carbon. Next, we shall see the productivity of an ecosystem. The rate of biomass production per unit area in a unit time is called productivity. So what is the biomass? What is the energy that is produced? Okay, that is referred to as biomass. And biomass is represented in terms of gram. Okay, so it is the amount of biomass. So it is referred in gram. Per unit area, so meter squared, and in a unit time, so it is year. So it is expressed in term of gram per meter squared per year, or otherwise the same is referred to as kilocalorie per meter squared per year. And it is classified as given below. Primary productivity, secondary productivity and community productivity. Primary productivity. The chemical energy or organic matter generated by the autotrophs during the process of photosynthesis and chemosynthesis is called primary productivity. So what is the organic matter that is generated by the autotroph? So if it is photosynthetically active organism, it will prepare by photosynthesis, or other organisms by chemosynthesis. So the net amount of chemical energy or the organic matter generated is referred to as primary productivity. And this primary productivity, it is the source of energy for all the other organisms, from bacteria to human, which are dependent upon the producers. And the primary productivity can be read under two headings: gross primary productivity and net primary productivity. So the gross primary productivity, GPP, the total amount of food energy or organic matter or biomass produced in an ecosystem. So the total amount of food energy which is produced in an ecosystem by all the organisms in that particular ecosystem. The total amount of food energy produced is referred to as, by the process of photosynthesis, is referred to as gross primary productivity. What is net primary productivity? The proportion of energy which remains after respiration loss. So it is referred to as net primary productivity. So how can you calculate this net primary productivity? So it can be calculated as GPP minus respiration. So the gross primary productivity, when you take the difference GPP minus respiration, it will give the net primary productivity. The NPP of whole biosphere is estimated to be about 170 billion tons per year, and out of which the NPP of oceanic producers is only 55 billion tons per year in a unit time. So we have seen the primary productivity. So the amount of energy of producers is referred to as primary productivity. Next is secondary productivity. So what is secondary productivity? So the producers will be taken up by the consumers. That is, autotrophic organisms will be taken up by the heterotrophs. So secondary productivity can be defined as the amount of energy stored in the tissue of the heterotrophs or consumers. So in that also you have gross secondary productivity and net secondary productivity. So gross secondary productivity is nothing but it is equivalent to total amount of plant material ingested, that is taken up by the herbivore, minus the material lost as fecus, that is waste. So what is the amount taken minus what is the thing that is material lost as a waste gives the gross secondary productivity. Net secondary productivity, storage of energy or biomass by consumers. So what is the amount it is stored after the respiratory loss is called net secondary productivity. The next term we will see what is community productivity. So we have seen primary productivity and secondary productivity. The last term that we are going to learn is community productivity. So it is nothing but the rate of net synthesis of organic matter by a group of plants per unit area, per unit time is known as the community productivity. So the net synthesis by the entire group of plants. The factors affecting primary productivity are the plant species of an area, their photosynthetic capacity, the nutrient availability, solar radiation, topographic factors and other environmental factor, and this will be varying with the different types of ecosystem. Thank you. Meet you in the next video.